And good morning, Hoosier Nation, and welcome to a victorious edition. We can say that. Victorious, unexpected edition of Hoosier Morning After. So much easier to get up and deal with it when we've got a win to talk about. This is Hoosier Morning After Michigan State. The victory light is finally back on. Sorry for those listening on podcasts. I've dubbed this and changed this to the victory light. So when that is glowing red, you know a win has happened. Haven't been able to turn it on for a while, but here we go. IU wins in the late game last night against Michigan State in the Breslin Center. A very hostile place to always go and play, 71-67, taking the record to 15-10 on the season, 6-8 in the Big Ten. Big quad one win. Definitely shifts to be the best win on Indiana's resume right now. With the still looming coaching change in the background, and an added addition to this game with the fact that if Izzo would have won, it would have passed Bobby Knight in conference wins, something that adds a little extra stain to it going in. And it didn't look good to start. Michigan State really stifled Indiana defensively on the offensive side, being aggressive. And really got anything they wanted as well, being physical, getting downhill on the offensive side. Then middle of the first half, Michigan State would go on a 10-0 run. And after that run, IU made the change to go to the zone, which obviously is one of the big stories of this game. Really stifling what Michigan wanted to do, really taking out the crowd in the student section, slowing them down, putting them really off rhythm. IU would then go on a 9-0 run to end the half, going up by 3. And hallelujah, Indiana came out in the second half, continuing what they started and how they finished in that first half. Second half zone would just continue to wreak havoc for Michigan State offensively. IU would flirt with a double-digit lead at times, but the ending would be tight and honestly a little bit scary and very drawn out as the game rolls really late. Switching free throws back and forth, a few guys missing ones that you didn't want to. A little nerve-wracking, crazy foul calls, things like that to close it out. But IU comes up with the win. Fantastic to see that. Great new energy, great little injection of hope to at least close out this season. Thanks for being here with us. I am your host, Chad Schwartzkopf. Here with me always, Martha, the mop lady. Martha, your opening thoughts.
You know, I coming into the game last night, I kind of had this suspicion that Indiana might play well, especially with what was on the line for Michigan State and Tom Izzo trying to break Bob Knight's record and you know, really Indiana having nothing to lose. But on the flip side, from everything that we've heard, Indiana is kind of behind the scenes for obvious reasons, a bit of a disheveled mess. You heard Don Fisher make some comments earlier in the week about just kind of the chaos behind the scenes. And again, it's for obvious reasons, but just, you know, with all of that noise that was going on, there was also the thought that maybe it would be a flop. So it was kind of, I could see both potential outcomes last night. So, you know, early in the game, I thought, oh gosh, here we go. I think Indiana got down maybe 20-8, down 12 points, almost halfway through the first half, and I'm like, this just is not going to go well. And credit to Indiana, man, and credit to the coaching staff. And I thought it was one of Mike Woodson's better coach games in his tenure at Indiana. Indiana was never going to get up and down the court with Michigan State. They were, you know, I think Michigan State could have fast break them to death if it wasn't for switching to that zone. And, you know, Woody's not a fan of his zone. He shared as much, but he made the choice. The staff made the choice to go to it. And I think it's what won Indiana the game. I mean, they slowed them down. They got back into the game by halftime. It was an impressive finish to the first half. I don't think Michigan State scored with something like 5 or 4 minutes left in the first half. I don't think they scored a point. So and it was all switching to that zone. And so you've got to give credit. You've got to give credit to, and I know we'll get into individual players, but starting lineup changed, and that's different for guys too. So with everything that's going on with, the stuff behind the scenes and the starting lineups changing, it would have been easy to lay an egg. So you've got to give credit to the staff and the players for coming out and going into that environment in that situation with all that was on the line and finding a way to win. It was impressive.
Yeah. And it's obviously been the big dialogue throughout the year, and we've talked a lot about it a lot on this show, is that too big lineup. And that starting lineup flashed up there, and it was kind of a shock. You saw Rice out of the starting lineup, and then you saw Goody in for Malik. So Malik coming off the bench wouldn't last long, as 2 minutes in, Woodson would put Malik in, and it would prove kind of positive and to that degree. And we'll talk about Malik maybe a little more in depth later, but he scores IU's first points after being down 7-0. And it's interesting. All the criticism we have for the too big lineup doesn't mean that you aren't going to find moments or games where it worked. And I feel like this might have been one of those games where it worked. It was less about room that the offense could get going and more about how more athletic Michigan State was. And they didn't allow Indiana's guards to really get into the paint much. Now, some of that is self-inflicted through confidence, I believe. I really feel like guys just feel like they can't do it. And eventually you saw it where Rice got in the second half and got downhill. And I think that maybe gave some confidence to Trey to find his avenue and get downhill a little bit more. But that too big lineup worked in this situation. Your kind of thoughts on how IU kind of subbed in those situations in this game? Because we saw a lot more subbing.
Yeah, I thought it was like I almost had the feeling, because it was when Indiana was down at the beginning that the starting lineup changed, but Luke Goody was I think the first one to get subbed out for Malik Reneau, and all of a sudden you were back to that original starting lineup, and like, well, that was quick. But to your point, it ended up working, right? I think, outside of some, Umar Ballo's an emotional guy. He plays emotionally. Sometimes I think that gets the best of him a little bit. I think he had a couple maybe unnecessary fouls. But outside of that, like, Indiana was going to go down low early and often. And I thought the play of Malik Reneau and especially Malik, right? I think Woody talked about after the game about how he had to sit down with Malik earlier in the week, another emotional guy, right? And tell him that he wasn't starting. Everything else that's going on, right? It's just probably another curveball in his world. And for him to kind of get it together and come in, and Calbert Chaney talked before the game about having a conversation with Malik, but just coming in and I think it just goes to prove a point that a lot of people have made about Malik Reneau can still be effective coming off the bench, right? He doesn't need to start. And I think it provides so much more roster flexibility when you use two bigs like we used them last night. I mean, that was a situation, to your point, where it calls to use them that way. And I think it was a scenario that many of us would have liked to see before last night. In fact, there were many things last night that you would see. It was just like, man, if we would have done some of these things or played with this type of emotion all season long, I don't know that we would be in the position that we are right now. In terms of looking for a different coach. But like, to come off the bench, go 8 for 19, get 19 field goal attempts up, 3 for 5 from the line. He had some big ones down the stretch, 19 points for Malik. And then, Ballo with his 14 points going 6 for 8. Those two guys, I think, won the game for Indiana. So it was nice to see, and it was nice to see it done in a different way.
Yeah, two big guys, both with double doubles. Like Martha said there, 14 points and 19 points respectively, 10 rebounds, 22 rebounds between the two of them, 10 for Ballo and 12 for Malik. Yeah, I do like you mentioned the coaching comments. I believe it was Chaney talking to Don beforehand, or it might have been you see her talking to Don after the game. There might be, I don't know, is there a little tiff right now going between Don and Woodson that he doesn't want to talk to Don for some reason? I don't know what's going on there, but For whatever reason, it was stated or passed along by one of those guys that when it was mentioned, like you said, to Reneau that he wasn't going to start, he kind of came at it with more of an attitude of, okay, coach, whatever you need from me kind of thing, which is great. It's great that he's buying in like that. The other interesting fact of what's going on right now is we're seeing so many changes. We're seeing the coaching staff. We're seeing Woodson appear to be so much more flexible and a little bit less stubborn with his ideas. A lot of the crazy subbing a lot of guys to try to find something in this game. A lot of different lineup adjustments, going to the zone like we did, and everything, which again, not going to surpass the irony there that one of Bobby Knight's most honored and loved players goes to a zone to protect his conference win record. But it's just interesting. We see all of these adjustments now at this point. I don't know if it's because there's some desperation tied in with a breath of relaxation of Hoosier Nation overall because of we're moving on at the end of the season. But just things look a little different on that end. Any of your thoughts on why we see these adjustments happening right now?
I think you said it well, right? It almost is like there's a weight off of Woody's shoulders. It kind of felt like he was coaching more freely last night and just a little bit looser. Obviously, there is that. I don't know if it's tension or what it is for not having the pre and post game conversations. Don's a guy that kind of does his media responsibilities through the week and is not shy about kind of talking about the state of the program. And we know Woody's kind of an inner circle guy, and if you step out of that circle, it's it's tough to regain that trust with him, right, wrong, or indifferent. So that could be part of it. Who knows? But I think, it just for all the mess we heard it was kind of behind the scenes and just kind of how disheveled everybody made it sound like it was. Certainly looked more organized last night. Now down the stretch, it looked like for a while they were doing everything they could to potentially lose the game, but just the execution through most of the first, I'll call it 30, 35 minutes was, I thought, obviously the start of the game is an exception, but the way they figured it out, rallied and took the lead and never looked back, I thought was some of the best basketball of the season and some of the best organization of the season to be able to work through that the way they did, go to the zone and really had Michigan State on their heels, from the time they went to that zone. And that's not something Indiana does very often. They're usually the ones that are, trying to play catch up or trying to react to the flow of the game and figure lineups out. But Indiana was the aggressor there, which was nice to see.
Yeah, and that's interesting. It's a good transition because I do want to talk about that zone defense and the recent success we've had with it. And you kind of now start to debate, do we lead with it? Or is it just kind of that thing we go to that we know we have in our bag? What it seems to have done and what it did in this game with a Michigan State team that's not good shooting the threes. So zones can often lead teams that are shooting threes. Can you don't do that because they'll just shoot their way out of the zone is a lot of times how it's said. But it's a great counter for Michigan State, a team that's going to want to play in the paint, has athletic guys that want to get driving downhill, and it slows and stops that. And more importantly, what it does for Indiana is it keeps the bigs in the paint for Indiana, and they don't have to come out of the perimeter and get trapped on switches onto guards like we've seen before, or Indiana's miscommunication in a regular nail slot rim. We've had miscommunications that lead to guys not switching, and then suddenly we're in rotation messes and everything like that. And it also forces guys to have to talk on the defensive end when you're in a zone, because you have to stay in your area and rotating over, sliding over, doing all of that, watching for the guy that's flashing to the free throw line, all those things. So it causes the team to have to lock in a little bit more. So it's very interesting to think about. Do you feel like we go to it more often? Do we need to start with it? Obviously, it needs to continue to be a focus and something that's polished in practices as we move forward. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's certainly. I think when especially when you're trying to attack a team with two bigs, I think you have to look at that from a defensive standpoint. I think especially a team like Michigan State, right? They're a little bit smaller, quick, athletic guys. They want to get you up and down the court. It did force them to shoot a lot of threes. Thankfully, they were really bad at it last night. I think they went 4 for 23 against the zone. They didn't score for the final 4:11 of the first half, and it really changed the entire tempo of the game. So if you're in a situation where we're trying to attack with two bigs, I think the zone is a good answer. I think, but obviously to your point, it does need some polishing. Michigan State did make some adjustments in the second half where they were able to start finding the middle a little bit and get some easier shots. So it's just something that, for a defense that I think already can be a little bit lazy, zones can tend to, you can get caught ball watching a little bit. And, I that's my one concern. And obviously we're getting down to the final stretch of the season where we've got some one must-win games. If we start to lean on this, we can't use it to, for some guys that I think already play lazy defense, for it to allow them to be even lazier, or we're going to end up getting burned. So that's the thing. I think you said it right with just continue to work on it in practice, give it different looks. And if it's something we continue to roll with, but I think the advantage to it now is you've got options, right? I think coming out with that different starting lineup, depending on who we're playing or going two bigs, now you've got some options. So, I think the zone just provides a lot of flexibility that this team needs with the size we sometimes play with. So it was good to see, and it was good to see it be effective.
Yeah. And the argument obviously always against the zone, like I said, is it allows the other team to possibly get hot from 3-point line just with little high screens and things like that. But I'd counter argue that with Indiana was already giving up open threes with the defense we were already doing. So why not go to something that's at least going to protect the paint? And then also, as Scott points out in the chat, including our foul prone Malik, yes, it also protects some of the bigs from having to come out and guard and getting into foul trouble because they get a little too handsy, or a crafty guard can kind of take advantage of having a big man on them. Speaking of crafty guards, look at that transition. Come on. Miles has been struggling recently in a lot of these games, but I feel like in this one, very much like Malik, kind of started to show his old self. He was out of the starting lineup, but came in and gave IU 10 points on 3 for 7 shooting, 1 for 3 from 3. 3 for 5 from the free throw line. Kind of missed one late in the game that made a little nervous on the front end of a 1-and-1. No turnovers, though, for him in 36 minutes. There were really moments in this game when he wasn't in, with the pressure and very athletic guards that Michigan State had, where I feel like he was really needed, especially as Trey kind of seemed like he got a little bit tired at the end of the game. We needed his ball handling, and he was able to get downhill. There were some great stretches in this game where he found his speed on the break and everything like that. Your thoughts on Miles' game?
I think if thinking back to you and I at the beginning of the year, kind of talking about IU and the work that was done in the portal, and if we would have, said that, we'd be 3/4 through the season and neither Miles Rice nor Cannon Carlisle would be starting, I think we would both be a little bit surprised. So I think that speaks to kind of what they haven't been for most of the season, and certainly Miles has probably contributed a little bit more and had his moments, but it's just been incredibly inconsistent from him. But I thought last night he was steady. I thought he played well, especially late in the game. Right, I think when they started applying that full court pressure, I thought Luke Goody did a really nice job of finding open guys on that press break, and oftentimes that was Miles. It was McKenzie a little bit late as well, but Miles was able to get open and get the ball and secure it and get fouled, right? I think that's important to do. I thought he also played some pretty decent defense down the stretch. But yeah, I think he's a guy that should be scoring double figures every night, getting to the hole. And, I think we all expected a little bit more from Miles. It's been incredibly inconsistent, but I thought last night was a nice effort from him. It was kind of what you needed. Obviously, coming off the bench probably isn't something that he ever thought he'd be doing at this point in the season, but all in, I thought it was a pretty solid effort from Miles Rice.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. And I do want to mention too, you kind of brought up the fouls at the end there, and there's obviously been a lot on Twitter and a lot of angst amongst Michigan State people talking about that foul on McKenzie at the end there to get him to the line and everything. And I know if the roles were switched, if it was Indiana and everything like that, if you switch the players on that, we'd be aggravated too. But it's still one of those things where you don't do that. You don't put the refs in position where you put your elbows up and into the guy, and then as he's moving, because I don't think he put much force on McKenzie in that. That was a lot of just McKenzie's momentum that was leading him out of bounds as he jumped. But you got your forearm up, and then as the player gets away from you, you slowly kind of extend it. That second view, that over the shoulder, almost what the ref was seeing, his point of view, it looked like a foul. You kind of put yourself in a bad position. So whether it was or not, you didn't do yourself any service in that. Next, I kind of want to talk about Luke Goody, because it was very interesting this morning when I woke up and looked at the stat line. I was kind of surprised that he got 10. It felt like a really quiet 10 for me. He was 3 for 7 from the field, 2 for 4 from 3, perfect 2 for 2 on the charity stripe, and 3 rebounds. And I just mean quiet because things didn't stand out. I don't know. What were your thoughts on Goody's game? Did anything stand out to you, or was it pretty quiet to you as well?
I think for me, it's just his presence that stands out. I think you kind of go with his offensive ebbs and flows, and take those as kind of, I don't want to call them an afterthought, because we need, I thought he had a really critical 3 at one point in the game down the stretch, to kind of keep the lead with a kind of a good buffer. But, you just look at the way he leads on the court, right? And I talked about kind of his ability to handle their full court press, and that's a skill set in and of itself, trying to inbound that ball against a quick defensive team like Michigan State. But just, he's the guy that's always bringing the huddle together, or getting on guys, or he's just the leader on the court. I think he's exactly what this team's been missing. So I always take that into account when I look at the game that Luke Goody's had. I think 10 points you take any night from Luke. I think that's right around his average, 10, 11 points. And I think you take that and just know that, like, having him on the court outweighs any sort of minor struggles he has offensively. So that's kind of what I look for Luke. I think he's really molded himself into the leader of this squad. I mean, you've got guys that have been around for a while, like, Trey and Anthony and, some others, and you don't see him bothered at all by getting in their face, and correcting them and telling them when they're wrong. It's not just the young guys. It's not just the bigs. It is across the board that Luke Goody is a coach on the floor. He's an incredibly bright kid. I say that because he grew up just down the road, goes the same school system as my kids. So I'm assuming he's a very bright kid. It's more of assumption. So just that 260 water, I think.
It's here. In the water. Yeah. I was going to say.
In the water. But no.
They put it in when they put the fluoride in. Something.
Something. Yeah. But I just like watching him lead, because he's what we've asked for. This team, one thing that we've griped about for years has just been kind of a lack of a floor leader. And for everything that hasn't existed with this team, I think that's really been an area that he shined at.
Yeah, just breaking news there. The 260's water is filled from the same spigot that Michael Jordan filled the water bottle during Space Jam. So take note. Get your kids drinking that. Let's bottle it up. We'll sell it all around. You kind of brought him up too, and I think he kind of chimes in there as well with Goody. Is is Lille, having Lille out there, and he has had this extended run in minutes because of that emotion and that physicality that he brings in there. And in this one, he was able to be a good point of someone to inbound to, and got fouled and made the 2 free throws when he got to the line. But otherwise, a relatively flat stat line for him. Which is not surprising because we're used to seeing that, but we know his impact. Although he did have 3 assists in this game, he comes and brings that energy, that edge, and dare I say it, almost that Will Sheehy kind of like bulldog kind of. I don't want to say dirty, but not as clean kind of player. He's a little more physical and a little more just kind of a gnat, kind of trying to wear at mentally the other teams. Your thought on maybe more of Lille's contribute how he contributed in this game?
29 minutes and 0 shots. I just realized that's
which is interesting because he's taken more shots recently.
Yeah, and also like he just has it wasn't a forgettable performance, right? I think there were moments that you think about his defense, right? And you just like usually when you go, play 29 minutes and don't get a shot up, you kind of are very forgettable on the court. But I thought he did a nice job of being involved, led the team in assists, albeit 3, right? But played good defense, played aggressive defense, and to your point, just kind of a guy, outside of Ballo fouling out, a guy that I think with his aggression, 4 fouls, and they felt like four pretty good fouls. Obviously we were fouling down the stretch, which was odd, but not odd, but odd how early we started that endeavor, which, felt like we were doing anything we could to not win the game there for a couple minutes. But yeah, Anthony, I thought played, obviously I feel like good things happen when he's on the court. With his effort, energy, and he just a guy that seems to be in the right place a lot of the right times. So another performance like that, I think obviously not, 2 points from the free throw line, needed him there towards the end of the game. But I thought his presence defensively, he's a guy that I think you can stick out in the zone and not worry about him falling asleep or ball watching, or, he's a guy that's going to be where he needs to be and whatnot. So I thought he was beneficial on the defensive end and key to that run to close the first and get that game, that ship righted to get us in line for a good second half as well.
Yeah, that fouling late that you kind of brought up there, it is interesting because I understand the theme and meaning behind it as far as Indiana fouling. Obviously, Michigan State, that that realm or that technique that always happens. But the reason Indiana goes to that kind of thing, or you'd go to a situation like that, doesn't make as much sense doing that against Michigan State, especially when the game was as it was or had gone on the way it had, with Indiana being in the zone and shutting them down. You normally would go to a foul situation like that, as far as Indiana's sake, when you're up by 2 scores and you're trying to keep the other team from shooting their way out of it, making threes, that kind of thing, killing a little bit of clock as they bring it up, then fouling, then allowing them to try to shoot 3 throws, and then you're going to bring it in, you're going to get fouled again. Extends the game a little bit more, but statistically makes sense in normal circumstances. For me, I had a little bit more issue with it in this game because of IU's success against Michigan State with the zone. You could have ticked down the time a little bit more, just staying in your zone situation, because they hadn't proven that they could make those threes, and just time would have run out better. But whatever. In the end, this technique was installed. They did that. It worked. It kept things going. Speaking of that and numbers and shooting and everything, let's get into a little bit of numbers in this. Actually, hold on. Before we get into numbers, there's one more player I want to talk about because it's an interesting player, and I want to get your thoughts on him, especially more recently games, is Tucker. He only got 7 minutes in this game and only finished with 3 points, all of them from the free throw line. But what I love from his recent game when he's gotten in there, and I think it really happened in this game as well, is he comes in with a real kind of FU attitude, and he just kind of attacks. I think IU was kind of missing that attack component in this game. And when he kind of comes in like he did, gets downhill, attacks the rim, does those Troy Williams-esque cuts, it kind of instills some more confidence in some of the other guards for Indiana. What are your kind of thoughts on Tucker in this game and kind of more recently?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly understand your point. I think it was the last home game. I don't know if it was against Michigan or the home game before. It was one of the home games that we lost, but might not even been a home game, but he came in and had some aggressive fouls. You and I talked about it after a game. I've tried to forget some of these games, so excuse me that I can't remember the exact game, but I think it kind of speaks to your FU attitude that he comes in with. I guess I worry less about him on the court. I think he's obviously a talented player. I think I just wonder what's going on behind the scenes with him too. Just, he sat a couple of games. I think he's certainly a guy that thinks he should be playing more. So you hope that that's not creeping into that FU attitude. As long as it's channeled the right way, right? I think he's a guy that I guess, and I hate to speculate, but I would be very surprised, and you could probably insert name at this point. I would be very surprised if he's on the roster next year. So I say that. So it's also like what's going into this FU, right? This type of what as long as it's channeled correctly and you're doing it for the right reasons, you're doing it for the cause and not doing it for, hey, I'm going to be gone here in a couple weeks, few weeks, whatever, a month. I'm just going to go in and try to be seen. So. That's the side of it, that as long as that's channeled correctly, a kid that I think came in with just like, his circle, his recruiting story is kind of odd, and just, the late ad, I think he's certainly, again, I go back to thinking he in his circle thinking he should be playing a lot more than he is. And I think that kind of was some of the reason that he didn't play. They were trying to work through some of that. So, yeah, I think talented kid, as long as it's channeled the right way, I think that he's a benefit to have on the court. But it's when he starts doing those things for the wrong reasons and starts playing selfish. I'm not saying he has, but it's a very thin line in the current situation. So something worth monitoring. But I do love the fact that he comes in and plays with a little bit of edge.
Yeah. It is that edge that's been missing, I think, overall in the season. And I obviously a lot of things that are clicking right now are that frustrating thing of, and now we're going to do this. But anyways, whatever. Torturous to try to think that way. Looking at stats, let's move on. Look at stats in this game. Kind of teased before, we were talking about shooting numbers. IU at 48% from the field goal, and with that stifling defense that IU had. Leading Michigan State to just 38%. But both teams continue bad in this one from the 3-point stripe, as Indiana was 23% or 3 for 13, with Michigan State being 17% at 4 for 25. So IU forcing them to a high volume of threes, and great in the game plan, as this Michigan State team, and most Michigan State teams don't tend to be 3-point shooting team. +6 in points in the paint is a good thing looking at in this game. What are some stats maybe that you see looking up and down the score sheet in this game?
Yeah, I thought Indiana did a decent job of taking care of the basketball last night. 9 turnovers to Michigan State's 11. I think when you go into an environment like that, that's key to stay in single-digit turnovers. So I thought that was impressive. I was concerned about, a zone, I think, can open yourself up to getting out rebounded, which they were. But it wasn't egregious. It didn't feel egregious. Didn't feel like Michigan State was getting a ton of second chance points. So I thought they managed that pretty well. I thought, you look at the bench points, and, IU had 32 bench points and only played 3 guys, compared to, Michigan State playing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 guys off their bench. And I'm not going to do that math, but it could be closer than I think on bench points. But just I think the point is to get 32 bench points from 3 guys off your bench, I think is huge for IU because there's been times where their bench has been non-existent. So that's
32 to 33.
So my point. I think my point does still remain, even though
yes,
the math
it does.
Good. I mean, I think it goes back to the whole Malik Reneau thing off the bench and still being able to be incredibly effective off the bench. It was almost like there was this reservation to have him come off the bench because it might affect him mentally, or it might, which is just ridiculous. It's still a guy that played 29 minutes, got up 19 field goals, hit his average in points, beat his average in points. It's like this. What, to your point, like you just said it, like why now? Like now we're in a situation where, we're fighting for our lives on the wrong side of the bubble. We've got a coach who's announced he's leaving, and now we're making these changes that we wish we would have seen and playing with the effort and energy we wish we would have seen. It's just that's the part that's like a little bit mind-boggling when you dig into these stats and when you review last night. So that's what I've got.
Yeah. One final one to look at, and it obviously helped us down the line. Scott pointed out as well a fact about it in the chat, but 8 steals, Indiana to 2 by Michigan State, which Michigan State and these guards are very good at guarding. We saw it kind of at the end of the game where they were trying to poke balls free, but usually they're a lot better on those steals. And Goody had 4 steals, Lille had 2 of them. And 2 of their steals, like Scott says, came in during winning plays at the end of the game. That's another obviously great stat to be looking at in this game. So, and another interesting thing, when you do look at the stat sheet, no zeros next to anyone's name as far as who played. So everyone that got in at least contributed to some respect at the point total for Indiana. And that's great to see. That's something we haven't seen a lot in this season. We often will see 1 or 2 names with high numbers next to them, and then a lot of other zeros across the board. So good things to see there. I do want to shift though, since I haven't had you on the program last time when all the craziness ensued, and we are in this situation of looking for a new coach in the off season. It's a very interesting time period, though, that for this to happen, as there's a lot of season left and a lot of names are being floated around, a lot of smoke, a lot of rumors. I do want to ask you, Martha, being in the custodial arts, is there anyone in the Boston area that can be spying and listening as they possibly run a floor buffer past an office window, or someone that you have in Ann Arbor that can be listening in to find out things? But beyond that, overall, just kind of give me your temperature as where you are, and maybe what is your list moving into this?
Yeah. It's tough. I hate to, obviously the home run hire would be Brad Stevens. I mean, we all know that. I think you have to take that swing. I think there's mixed reports on where he's at with that, with any type of interest. I think that's a an attempt that you've got to make. I think we were closer last time with Brad Stevens than a lot of people think, or a lot of people reported, in the media. So I think you've got to start there. And then, I think the valuable thing here is, Scott Dolson's not a dummy. I think he's probably been preparing for this moment for a lot longer than any of us know. So I think he's probably got, you look at what he did on the football side, and, there's reports on how much impact he had on the hiring of Mike Woodson, or, what impact he did or didn't have. But I think this is going to be his hire. I think he knows what's at stake here. I've got full trust in the guy. He grew up around this program. I think he's been able to see firsthand the apathy take over this program. And I've been down there a couple times, but just since last year when the comments were made on senior day, and just the prove it to me approach that this fan base has taken, and just the amount of empty seats, and it's just an apathetic environment right now. And he knows with the right hire, you can bring that back immediately. I go back to the fact that this program can run itself. You just have to hire a good coach. And there are a lot of good coaches out there. I think you get past Brad Stevens, and then you've got to start looking at, Dusty May's the obvious one. Beyond that, some of these names being thrown around, it starts to get murky. I think, there's a lot of people that want that have mentioned the name Chris Beard. I think that there's a non-starter aspect with him that I don't think Indiana will touch. My opinion. I just think with the baggage he brings, there would be too much noise involved in a hire like that to even go down that path. So I think that the level, if you get past Brad Stevens and Dusty May, it starts to get really, really muddy for me and murky. I don't know anything more than you or anybody else, but that's when I put my real trust into, because I think both those guys would be really, really solid hires. But beyond that, I start to put my trust into Scott Dolson, that he's done his homework. There's a lot of good guys out there. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a surprise name. I think it'll be an established name, a guy that's had success at the Division I level. And if it gets past those two names, I wouldn't be surprised if it was somebody that we maybe had on a list somewhere, but didn't necessarily expect to get hired, much like on the football side. So it's going to be interesting, but I don't know. I'm equal parts excited and also equal parts confident that Scott Dolson's going to get this right.
Yeah. And I think that's where I will always stand with this, is that as opposed to the past times when Indiana's been, in this situation with the Archie hire or the Woodson hire, Indiana right now is in the best place for that. Obviously, it's been always mentioned that IU has a top 10, maybe arguably even top 5 NIL support. You've got Scott Dolson, like you just said, and drove home that is very smart and respected, and his opinion is going to mean so much more, and his discretion because of what he was able to do on the football side. Equally so, you've got a coaching staff or a support staff above that, a president that loves athletics and everything. So I think it's in a good position. Martha, I know you've got to go on us, so close it out with your closing thoughts on this game then.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I've got to get a kid to school a little bit early today, so I apologize that I have to jump off early. I think it's been a loud couple weeks, right? And I think last night was proof that this team can obviously, it's a talented team. It's a talented roster. We've known that since the start of the season. Has it been managed correctly? I think the obvious answer there is no, but I think last night with taking some of the weight off coaches' shoulders, players' shoulders, I think they played freely. I think they learned a lot about themselves, that, some things like we've talked about in the show that maybe should have been learned earlier, but still a lot of basketball to be played, right? I think with as weak as the bubble is this year, there were some bracketology lists that showed Indiana as the first 4 out before last night. And that is a huge quad 1 win on the road last night. So, you look at what's remaining on the schedule. You've got Purdue at home. I think you've got UCLA at home this Friday. You've got opportunity after opportunity after opportunity against good opponent. This team can still find its way into the tournament, right? You hate the fact that this is never a team that should have to back itself into the tournament, right? That damage has been done, but there's still some things to enjoy here down the stretch of the season. It's frustrating, right? At the same time, this is not a program that should be fighting for its tournament life at every point of every season during this point of the year. So that part of it gets old, but I go back to just trusting Scott Dolson. So I'm going to enjoy. I'm not going to be noisy about these last couple of weeks. I think that's easy to do, right? The damage has been done. The decisions have been made, right? We have to live with the way the next 4 weeks go, and we don't have a lot of control over it. So I think the best thing we can do is just cheer as hard as we can for these guys to finish off strong. Mike Woodson, for everything he hasn't been as a coach, he's still an Indiana basketball legend, right? And, we can scream till we're red in the face about kind of the way he's decided to coach this program. But at the end of the day, he's going to leave this place as an Indiana basketball legend, one of the all-time greats that suited up in an Indiana uniform. So I think we've got to find a way to try to send him out on as professional and graceful as a way as we can, right? I think that's important too, because you don't want to bury one of your own. It's just tough, and I think it's already painful enough. So hopefully we can send him out on a high note. And on that note, I've got to run. All
right. Thanks,
Chad.
you, Martha.
We'll see you Saturday morning.
Sounds good, buddy. I'll take advantage and transition to that and do Martha's duty on that as well. IU's obviously back home again on Friday. And if you find yourself in a situation where you have a ticket that you aren't going to use, please think about Hoosier Ticket Project. HoosierTicketProject.org is where you can go to donate your tickets, your unused tickets. So that way they can find a home for a deserving fan or someone that has never been to a game, doesn't have the financial means in these tough times to get themselves to a game. HoosierTicketProject.org can take care of that for you. Also, if you know of someone that is struggling but is a big fan, and going to a game might give them that lift of excitement and everything that they need in their life, there's also a spot on the website where you can nominate someone to receive tickets. So again, HoosierTicketProject.org, a great place to go and a great thing to do with your tickets. Again, like I said, Indiana plays Friday at 8 p.m. against UCLA. Another chance, to come home and get a good home win. Obviously, fans should be energized. Student section should be energized after this big win. This is going to be a thing where we see how they respond. How do we respond after this big win? It's always a nervous factor as an Indiana fan, because a lot of times we get that hangover, that letdown after big games. But let's at least continue to fight moving forward. The events, as they sit with the coaching change and everything else, however awkward it appears, they have brought a new level of fight to this team right now. Whether they're playing relaxed because of it or whatever it is, it might be a little too little too late if they can't be consistent with it. And recent evidence of this season kind of contradicts that possibly. But there is still hope that it does. So let's hope this continues. And these players that we love, and this coach who, as Martha says, regardless of whatever you think about his coaching tenure, is still a legend of the program. So let's finish things off in a high note. Let's let these players, a lot of them that we love, Anthony Leal and everything, go out fighting, going out on a high note, get into that Big Ten tournament, do some noise, maybe irk into the tournament overall. So we'll see what happens. I'm definitely ignited with a new hope as we move forward, and a new situation for this team. Excitement to finish out this tumultuous season that we have had, but at least we're at peace where we stand and excited for right now because of the game we got to watch last night. Thank you for being here with me and with Martha. We will be back again, like I said, on Saturday morning after the UCLA game. Let's hope it's another victorious one for IU. Follow me on Twitter at General Chadwick. Follow Martha at the Mop Lady. There you can find out information when we're going to go live and everything. Get on that YouTube if you'd like to chat and join along. Some great conversations going on in the chat today as well, with Bison and Scott and Gritty in there as usual. So come on over, enjoy that. Until then, go out there, guys. Have yourselves a wonderful day. And as always, let's go Hoosiers.